Генерал Ходжес, большое спасибо, что согласились. Всегда рада.
General Hodges, thank you for joining us and nice to see you. I first wanted to hear your thoughts about the on the ground situation in Ukraine. It seems that everything is starting to snap into focus. Can we say that the counteroffensive has already begun?
So, of course, the Ukrainian General Staff and the Office of the President have done a very good job protecting information. We should not know when and where and how, because if we know, then obviously the Russians will know. So this is important that the General Staff has been so disciplined in all of this. Nonetheless, there is obviously a lot of anticipation, and it's clear that the General Staff and Ukrainian Armed Forces have been working very hard to prepare for the next phase of the war. Now, before they would actually launch an attack, if you will, of course, they're going to spend a lot of time doing what we would call shaping operations to prepare the ground, to prepare the situation so that when the attack commences, it has the best chance for success. So that means destroying or disrupting Russian transportation networks, air defense, ammunition, headquarters. This is all an important part. And it may not have a set time limit. It may be planned as a condition. When certain things have happened, then they're ready. So I think that's how I would imagine that they're doing this. But also, they have to prepare their own forces. Are they at the level of training? Have they practiced enough of what we call combined arms with artillery, infantry, tanks, engineers, etc.? Do they have enough of the ammunition and all of these things? And then finally, the ground. I mean, obviously, you want to be able to move as quickly as possible once this has started. So all of these factors are the things that the General Staff is considering.
Но когда мы говорим о том, в каком положении Украина подошла к этому...
When we talk about the situation Ukraine finds itself in approaching this counteroffensive, there are those, including experts, journalists, and politicians, who say that Kiev doesn't have enough equipment and ammunition. What do you think?
Well, I would say that most of the people that are commenting on this don't know. I mean, the General Staff will know. This is not, experts sitting here in Frankfurt or in Washington or Berlin or London will not know. Only the General Staff will truly know because they have the most accurate information and they can make the assessment. They can look into the eyes of their soldiers and know, are they ready? There's another factor here that is not talked about nearly as much, and it's the Russian side. I believe that the Russians are very fragile right now. We know that Prigozhin and Shoigu, Kadyrov, all of these guys hate each other. We know that there are 0 Russian soldiers that want to be in Ukraine. We know that they also are running out of ammunition. Yes, they're launching missiles against apartment buildings, and one day this is going to be stopped. But the inability of the Russian Air Force to destroy even one convoy or train bringing equipment and ammunition from Poland into Ukraine, that is amazing to me. That shows how inept they are. They cannot hit a moving target. And so I am actually, I believe that the Russian side is fragile. And if and when the Ukrainian counteroffensive begins, if they get momentum, once they make penetration of these Russian lines, I believe it is possible. It is possible that the whole thing collapses, and that I don't know this, of course. I may be wrong. I may be surprised, but I think the potential is that this could go much faster. No doubt it will be very difficult. No doubt there will be casualties. No doubt the Russian side will attempt to preempt all of this. The the part that is frustrating for me is that my own government cannot or will not say we want Ukraine to win, and then deliver those long range weapons that would make it make me much more confident that Ukraine could achieve success. That's what's missing is long range precision weapons, whether they come from an airplane or they come from a rocket or they come from a missile launcher. Those are the things that are needed.
Генерал Ходжес, ну а как вы объясняете вот эту позицию?
General Hodges, how would you justify the position of the US and Ukraine's other allies in the West who are still holding back from providing the Ukrainian armed forces with all the military equipment it needs? Literally last week, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO provided Kiev with 98% of the promised weapons. How do we interpret this?
I was surprised to hear that number, but I think probably what they're saying is 98% of what has been promised has been delivered, or maybe something like that over the course of the last year. So frankly, I don't think that's an accurate way to portray because obviously a lot of what has been asked has not been delivered, but it's also not been promised. I'm talking F-16s or ATACMS or things like that. So that number is useful in terms of conveying of all that's been promised. This is how much has been delivered, which is good. But what's been asked and what's been promised, that's a much different percentage. And so I think that I can't explain why the administration has been reluctant to say we want Ukraine to win, and why the other governments also don't say this. I think part of it is an exaggerated fear of Russian escalation of use of nuclear weapons, and so we need to have some public debate and explanation of what Russian nuclear weapon employment might actually be. What would it be? It's not going to be like end of the world thermonuclear strategic weapons. It's something much lower than that. And so I think there's got to be a way to describe this, since it has such an impact on decision making. We continue to deter ourselves. That's one thing. The second thing, and by the way, I don't believe the Russians would actually use it. The second thing is, I think there's some concern that once Crimea is liberated, that it would unleash so much chaos on the Russian side, and people are not sure what does that look like, what would happen, and so they're not able to comprehend yet what would happen with a breakup of the Russian Federation, or if there was some cataclysmic change in Moscow, and so there's uncertainty about that, and I think some people are nervous about it. And then the third reason, perhaps, and all of this is just my own speculation, but China has a role here somewhere. I think that the Chinese have probably said they would not want to see a total collapse of the Russian Federation, at least not in a catastrophic way. That would have global implications that would affect them also. So perhaps Beijing has communicated this to the White House, but I don't know that.
Here, I'll ask perhaps the most important question to you, someone who's definitely well-versed in the art of war. If you were asked for advice, Mr. Hodges, what would you say to Ukraine? What should they do? What strategy should they follow? Where should they start, and what direction should they advance in?
I believe that Crimea is the decisive terrain. When Ukraine has captured and liberated Crimea, that changes everything. The whole wars will have changed. And I think the General Staff knows that as long as Russia occupies Crimea, that Ukraine will never be safe or secure. That Crimea is like a dagger that's pointed into the belly of Ukraine. So there's no way that Ukraine can settle for an outcome where Russia controls Crimea. And then
are you saying that that the Ukrainian armed forces would start with Crimea?
No, I'm coming to that. I'm trying to explain why it's decisive. Okay. And of course, Ukraine will never be able to rebuild its economy as long as Russia occupies Crimea, because it blocks access of Azov Sea. They could dominate the Black Sea coast. So this would make it impossible for Ukraine, I think, to really rebuild its economy as long as Russia occupies Crimea. So that's why the General Staff, I'm sure, has recommended that the liberation of Crimea has to be the priority, not the liberation of Donbass. If I were advising, and of course they don't ask me, nor should they ask me, but if I were advising, I would say, this counteroffensive should aim to isolate Crimea, to break the so-called land bridge that runs from Rostov through Mariupol, Melitopol into the peninsula, break that, and then bring up more and more long-range precision weapons, HIMARS and others, that can then hit Crimea. So the point is to make Crimea untenable for Russian forces, hit Sevastopol so that the Black Sea Fleet has to leave, hit the airbase at Saki, hit the logistics hub at Jankoy, hit all of these places on the peninsula with precision, just like the drone strike that hit the oil tanks the other day, and make it impossible for Russian forces to stay there. That would be the key. And then, of course, the third phase would be to actually enter the peninsula and clear it of whatever Russian forces are still there. Then I think there will not be a lot of enthusiasm in the Kremlin for fighting in Donetsk and Luhansk.
А если попытаться спрогнозировать дату все-таки, я понимаю,
And if you had to put a date on it, I know this might be guesswork, but still. In the Russian-speaking social media sphere, a lot of people are talking about the 9th of May as a possible date, and it's a special sacred day for Vladimir Putin. Do you think Kyiv would be ready to advance on the 9th specifically?
I would imagine that the General Staff and the President will have thought about options to demonstrate Ukraine's resolve, right? And that, so we'll see, but I would not waste the life of a single I would not waste the life of a single Ukrainian soldier just to do something on on a particular date, if it was not the right time for the whole thing. I think there will be ways that Ukraine can do things that will be useful in the kind of the information psychological way that don't require an unnecessary loss of life. I think it's even more powerful. The rumors are that supposedly Putin has demanded that Bakhmut be captured by. I doubt that's going to happen. Even if that's true, I doubt it's going to happen. And that's a bigger humiliation that on Victory Day, there is no victory to celebrate.
что ж,
Thank you, General Hodges. It's been fascinating talking to you as always. Until next time.
We operated in Russia for 12 years, and the government tried to get rid of us 3 times. They got us on the 6th day of the war in Ukraine.
Мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We left Russia, but we kept going. We have now decided to tell the truth about Russia, the war, and Russian society in English as well.
Kherson is Putin's 3rd major defeat in a row.
What is wrong with the Russian army?
Stories no one else can tell you. Hear it right from the source. Subscribe to our channel.